Even before the pandemic, the digital divide was affecting educational, socioeconomic, and health outcomes for underserved communities. Today, the stakes are higher and could affect America's resilience and its competitiveness. To discuss sustainable ways to close the digital divide, I'm joined by Michael Hinojosa, Superintendent of the Dallas Independent School District. To discuss sustainable ways to close the digital divide, I'm joined by Michael Hinojosa, Francella Ochillo, Executive Director of Next Century Cities, and Jason Oxman, President and CEO of the Executive Director of Next Century Cities. Thank you all very much for joining us. We had a little bit of feedback there, but I think we fixed it, hopefully. Thank you all for joining us. Let me just start out and ask about what's been going on in Dallas. I mean, it's been a lot of attention, Michael, to what you achieved in making a huge priority of connecting students and your school district. In making a huge priority of connecting students and your school district. And hello. I guess, Michael, we cannot hear Michael for a second. Well, let me go to Francella. Francella, I know you've been working with underserved communities and have also prioritized connectivity and making sure that we get over this gap and then begin dealing with this. Tell us what your dashboard looks like of where you put the most effort first.
Hi, well, it's Francella, and I'm really excited to be here today. Next Century Cities has been working on digital divide issues for years, and we focus on making sure that the local officials who are really charged with making sure that every single household is able to connect, that they're actually able to do so. And COVID has only made that even more urgent. One thing I do want to point out is that when you're talking about the communities that are affected the most, quite frankly, it doesn't matter if you're in the rural community that can't connect or in an underserved urban area. We know that every single one of these communities, they have the same hopes and dreams for their kids. They still want to be able to run their businesses. All of them have things in common, and making sure that we can connect every single household, that should be a national priority.
So do you have any kind of scorecard that you look at and how to do that? And when you do approach it, and I've been to a lot of technology forums that has looked at anything from connecting wires through the stripes on a road to get to Appalachian communities. Maybe it's a cost factor, maybe there are other factors, but it requires a needle to move to get these communities. Where are you finding that you get the most result for your efforts?
I think that the reality is that every single community is in a different place, even though they're all trying to answer the same question. And so if you are in a hard to reach area, your issue isn't only going to be about getting the nuts and bolts, the actual wires and infrastructure out to your community. Then you're going to actually have to deal with the cost, because very often people who are in hard to reach areas pay exponentially more than people who might be in metropolitan areas. If you're in an urban community where you might be in a pocket, a community that isn't able to adopt, you're going to answer questions about affordability and making sure that we're addressing the social impact barriers that might be interfering with people being able to take advantage of being online. So I think that in general, there are economic factors, there are political factors, and there also has to be a community buy-in to decide that we're going to make this a priority. But what concerns me the most is that we cannot wait to hope that someone else solves this problem. I think that every single stakeholder at the table, it doesn't matter if you are a government official at every level of government, if you are a provider, if you are a concerned citizen, everybody has to own a piece of this problem.
Jason, you know, 3 months ago I knew you and the ITIC, the Information Technology Industry Coalition, and you did great work. It's 3 months later. And now all the world is in your area. It's a massive change. And I'm just interested, as you think about the policy deficits and the literacy deficits in this town of understanding what it takes, what do you need to deliver a safe, less wobbly world there? Because, you know, we all used to talk casually about us moving into an information age, but I don't think we were really there. Now I feel we're there. So how has your world changed?
Well, it's a great question, Steve. It's the philosophical question of the age, if you will. And as we heard from Brian Hendricks, the philosophical thought leader of the industry, quoting Kierkegaard in his remarks, which I thought was terrific.
Pretty cool.
The technology industry is certainly in the spotlight, and that is to say that everything that we are doing as a society to adapt to the coronavirus pandemic involves technology in some way, whether we're working from home, learning from home, as my kids are doing, or accessing our doctors via telemedicine. Broadband is the critical infrastructure of the day. So for the technology industry, the ability to help consumers and businesses adapt and eventually recover from the health pandemic, that's what we're really focused on. To your question about what we need to be thinking about, what policymakers need to be thinking about, there is that digital divide issue. As Commissioner O'Reilly noted, 20 million Americans that don't have access to broadband. That's absolutely unacceptable in this era where the ability to work and the ability to learn is dependent on broadband connections. We need to address that. We need to address the affordability question. We need to address the access question. We need to address the build out issue. And then we need to address digital tools to make sure people know how to use these technologies. That's what the industry is focused on. And that's what we need as a society to be focused on, and what we need policymakers to think about how to address those critical digital divide issues.
Before I leave you, and I want to jump over to Michael in a moment, and I guess we're not on cable TV, so I can be like, who has to get pissed off enough to fix this digital divide problem? When I was at New America, the New America Foundation in 1999, I remember a massive article that we were involved with in the New York Times on the digital divide. That's 22 years ago, essentially. And so it's like this ever-present problem. And I respect so much what Francella's doing, what Michael's doing, but who has to get pissed off enough to actually make this an issue that we don't talk about anymore because we've solved it?
Yeah, I think the issue is, how do we adopt a national strategy that focuses on a public-private partnership to address this digital divide issue? Back in 1999, when you were working on those issues, I was at the Federal Communications Commission working on broadband policy issues. It was an issue back then. It's an issue today. We adopted a national strategy to wire every American home with circuit-switched wireline telephony, when we used to make phone calls from home. That was a public-private partnership. It required a lot of investment by the government and a lot of investment by the private sector. We need to look at ways in which the government and the private sector can work together on infrastructure, wireline infrastructure, to address areas that need those fiber connections, wireless infrastructure to address areas that need the 5G wireless broadband connections. This requires government policy, freeing up spectrum, investing in infrastructure. We had the Universal Service Fund that wired every American with a telephone. We need to figure out, how can we smartly invest government dollars in infrastructure that gets every American connected to broadband.
Thank you. Michael, I want to bring you into this because I want to hear about Operation Connectivity. My family, part of my family's from Dallas, and they didn't have Operation Connectivity when they were back there. Tell us what you've done and why. I hear about it all over the place. Why has it been such a game changer for now that we have the governor and other people celebrating what you've achieved in Dallas?
Well, hopefully you can hear me now. But one of the things that I was concerned about was that, so I guess I have to be the loudmouth. I have no authority, but I have a bully pulpit, and I have gone very public that this is a social justice issue, and we need to have a way to connect families. And we're going to solve it in Dallas. But a lot of people don't realize that 90% of our students are economically disadvantaged and 45% are English learners. And this is a public utility that is required to survive, just like electricity, water, and gas. And so we just have made a lot of noise about it. I think I'll be the one that keeps talking about this until we have a solution. And this is bigger than us. This needs to be a solution for the state, and the governor has noticed that. And he's put the commissioner and myself as co-chairs of a task force for the state of Texas. And I've also written a letter to the FCC about how we can loosen up some E-rate requirements and to get started on this project. But the sense of urgency is here, and it affects telemedicine, it affects the workforce trying to get a job. All of these can be solved on this one issue if we all work together on public and private and multi-jurisdictional.
Michael, I want to ask you just a technical question. Is South Dallas part of your school district?
Absolutely. It's over half of our district.
So I know I used to talk to your former mayor, Mike Rollins, quite a bit, and he said this was the huge concern for him of bringing development, jobs, connect people that were connected, that you couldn't forget South Dallas anymore. So technically, how did you do it? Give us some picture of what it is tangibly that you're doing to connect these folks.
Well, the irony is that we have the infrastructure that was described by the city's folks. What we don't have is that we haven't knocked down the front door. How do we get inside the homes of the families? And how can they afford the subscription fees. We want our telecom partners to make money, but if we will have to use public dollars to make sure that they have access, that we pay for broadband connectivity at high speeds. And if that's what we got to do. That's what we're going to do. But how can we all solve this together so that everybody wins?
Thank you. Francella, let me ask you a question here on kind of what you're seeing when it comes, because part of what happens is demand, right? You get a great app, or you get telehealth, or you get people doing things online they may not have ever done. Have you seen something that becomes sort of viral in someone's hands that begins the demand function, where they say, I want more? I'm just interested in how communities that have been neglected or left out become, great consumers of this, and that there's great demand for it.
I don't think the issue is demand, quite frankly. I think that COVID has revealed the fact that this is about every single household needs access. And what concerns me is that we're still having conversations about whether or not this is a necessity. The problem is that the people who have to make policies about this aren't the people who are disconnected. And quite frankly, if the policy and lawmakers in every single state capital and here in Washington, D.C. had to exist for an entire day with no connectivity, or even at the minimum speeds of 25.3, I don't think that we'd be asking about whether or not this is a necessity. I think we'd be making plans to make it happen and get it into every single household. Well,
I want to ask you to kind of, because we have a lot of folks watching right now, I want you to describe, because people may not know that there are such communities that aren't connected. We just had Susan Del Bene saying she could drive an hour and a half out of Seattle and you've got it there. I know that there's a very large percentage of students in Ohio that are largely in the Appalachian part of Ohio that do not have regular at-home access to broadband. E-rate's trying to fix some of this, but can you just trick through some of the places in the country that would be surprising that you're working on to try to get connected?
I think there are places right here in Washington, D.C. that aren't connected. If you go over to the other side into different wards outside of Ward 1 and Ward 2, this becomes more and more of a problem. It doesn't matter what city that you're in. Outside of Seattle, you have Mukilteo and little places like that. Outside of Cleveland, Ohio, it's a huge issue. We have members in Oxnard, California, Gainesville, Florida, in small places in Texas, New York. There are lots of places that are struggling with this that people would be surprised it's actually right in your backyard. And I think that this is a moment that we really need to coalesce around the idea that every single household needs access for lots of different reasons. And for the people who are connected, we are paying a collective cost for when we have small businesses that can't participate in the digital economy, when we have city managers that are thinking about how are we going to make up with tax revenue shortfalls. This is a part of everyone's problem now. And we can't just wait around and say, well, I'm not sure I can see it with my own eyes, because it doesn't need to be on the front page of the newspaper anymore. We have been inundated with these illustrations. So I think the conversation right now needs to switch from how we're excited about, the generosity of corporate partners who are coming up with, 3 and 6 month solutions, and transitioning into how do we come up with a sustainable long-term plan that ensures that every single American can participate in a digital economy.
Thank you, Jason. I think you can hear the urgency from Francella and the commitment of Michael Hinojosa and what's going to happen in Dallas. You've got those corporations out there, and you also are just down the street from me in Washington, D.C. on most days, on most normal days. I guess I want to ask you, if we were to kind of team up all right now and say, hey, we're going to move this, what do you think we could tangibly do?
Well, I think it's first of all, it's exactly right. And the work of Next Century Cities on this is crucial, and the work of educators around the country is crucial. And the note that I want to echo is that we've learned very quickly over the last few weeks that having internet accessible in public spaces that we used to rely on for connecting the unconnected doesn't work anymore. So students who don't have access at home can't go to the local library, can't go to the local school to get access to internet because they're closed. And so I absolutely agree. The fundamental thing that has become clear in the last few weeks is everyone needs to be connected at home. And so they can learn and work and access the other side of the digital divide. So what can we do as an industry? We've highlighted a number of things that our member companies have been focused on in the last 8 weeks, ranging from making end user equipment available for free to low income students, laptops, tablets, computers, and the like, to reducing the cost of services for low-income students, to making training tools available online. And we have that all set out on our website. Dozens of companies have launched millions and millions of dollars worth of investments and initiatives. But at the end of the day, what we need to focus on is what do we do going forward? And that's the public-private partnership that we've been talking about. You know, the FCC has a longstanding program called Lifeline, which has made available those traditional circuit switch telephone lines to consumers so everyone has access to a phone. We need to expand that. We need to focus on investment in infrastructure, government support of infrastructure for low income and rural areas that makes those broadband connections available. And once that program is up and running, the private sector is very focused on making it happen. So those wireline and wireless connections can reach everybody.
Francella, and I realize I've been mispronouncing your name, I apologize. Francella, I think it's good to get that right. I want to ask you, something, and Michael as well, and then I want to go to the public for some questions. But in this COVID crisis, one of the things, I'm a storyteller. The COVID crisis, there are heroes and there's a villain. There's a virus, but there may be other villains out there as well. But heroes and focusing in on frontline health workers, focusing in on people who've made a difference and who stand out, has been something that I've seen galvanize attention and galvanize change. Are there heroes that we should know about in this story? Are there people that are moving the needle on connectivity that you would like to focus the spotlight on? Because I think sometimes seeing those heroes in a way and helping to level out, to answer some of Bruce Hendricks's, of Nokia's questions of how to get access, how to deal with cost, how to deal with this would be interesting. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but who, and maybe it's yourself, but who are some of the heroes out there that you see in this story?
I think that there's a lot that's been reported on the work that's being done to make sure that students can keep learning, and really not only the generosity of companies, but also even city leaders, teachers, people who are just concerned citizens who are going out of their way to say, I don't know how to help and I'm not sure how to fix it, but I'm going to start here right now with donating equipment, or saying that I'm going to volunteer to make sure that I can help with digital literacy. There's lots of different ways that people can help. One thing that I want to see is that we need more people involved in this conversation, and that's heroic. When we can start opening up this conversation outside of the small group of people that are policymakers, decision makers, but people who are really steeped in it, to making sure that this is a public conversation where people can actually know, okay, this is how I bring it up at my city council meeting. This is what I bring up in an op-ed, so that other people can participate in the national dialogue. Because again, if people who are already connected are the only ones making decisions for communities that remain disconnected, we are going to have the same conversation 10 years from today.
Thank you. And I hope we're not doing that. Michael, I'm going to ask you the other question. You can talk about heroes, but I'm going to ask you who the villains are. Every good story needs a hero and a villain. But Michael, you were naming some a minute ago, but who would you identify as a villain, or at least somebody you got to get beyond to help this move this problem for more students and more citizens?
Well, I'll tell you what's villain is a concept. It's called partisanship. This is such a bipartisan support issue that, in fact, that's why Texas, I think, has a chance to solve it, because it is bipartisan. At Washington, D.C., only $1.5 billion is in the current House package to solve this problem. I think when it goes to the Senate, I think if they start working together, bipartisan and bicameral, then the villains can be pushed away. We have heroes like the Federal Reserve Bank, and we have collective impact agencies, and potentially the state of Texas will be a hero if we are successful. But a vision is a dream with a deadline. We got to get this done in the next 90 days, at least partially. So at least have a plan, a roadmap, to get this done. And so I think time is a villain. I think partisanship is a villain. Hopefully we can get some heroes out of this.
I think that's a pretty good villain myself. Now we got a question from Indiana, Sarah Bertone. Sarah?
This is Sarah Berthaud in Switzerland County, Indiana. Do you have any suggestions on how to spark interest in developing digital skills in rural areas where internet is costly and still considered a luxury?
Francella, would you like to take a hit at that?
Can you please summarize it? Forgive me, because I can't hear her question.
And I couldn't hear it very well either. And I don't have it in front of me. Hold on, we can play it again.
This is Sarah Brichto in Switzerland County, Indiana. Do you have any suggestions on how to spark interest in developing digital skills in rural areas where internet is costly
Got it.
and still considered a luxury?
Great. Thank you. On how to spark digital skills. Francella?
I think that it's important for us to meet people where they are. I think that it's not that everyone is going to be all of a sudden fluent in being able to get online. For some people, it is going to be adequate for them to be able to start email accounts, do online banking, be able to access information, maybe even social media. But we also need to arm people with being able to be creators and to be able to contribute to the digital ecosystem, because this isn't just about people being able to get by and get into the circle. We need to make sure that they're actually able to contribute to an online economy.
Michael, let me go to you as well on that, because you're educating. So how do you spark an interest among those that haven't been interested in more digital skills? Did we lose Michael? I'm going to go to Jason Oxman, because we may have lost Michael for a moment. Jason?
Our parents, our teachers.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks.
Yeah.
Digital literacy is obviously incredibly important, and the issue here is how do we arm citizens with the skills they need to make use of these digital tools. We've actually been focused on this as an industry during the pandemic, organizing free professional learning programs for consumers to help teach those digital literacy skills. Companies like Adobe and Apple and Google have been doing that. Also hosting online communities for professionals to exchange best practices in digital literacy as a lot of jobs move from physical to online. Companies like Cisco and Google have been doing that as well. So it's an incredibly important issue, and will be even more important with more than 30 million Americans having become recently unemployed, and a lot of the opportunities being work from home or other digital skills required opportunities. We're focused on training.
Where do they access this? Can they go to your website, Jason?
Absolutely, Steve. itic.org is our website. We've got a link right on the front there that links to all of those.
Great to lay out the resources. Michael, I know you're back, and so let me ask you the same question from our caller from Indiana. How do you go about dealing with both sparking digital skills, but dealing with the digital literacy unevenness out there?
Well, I think a lot of our teachers do a great job of that. We train them on how to get that done. But also, I think we need some partners. Like I think even for immigrant families, we need our Spanish language TV stations to help out in this area. I think, but my connection here is getting a little weak, so I'll probably stop there.
Well, great. Well, I want to thank Francella Ochillo, Michael Hinojosa, and Jason Oxman. Thank you so much. It was a great panel, great discussion, and thanks also for the questions that came in for this. A big thank you to Nokia as well for their support, and to all of you for watching and participating in today's conversation.